Hey everyone, Ryan Badgley from the Barfly Tailgate Show, and football season is kicking off, and I know you feel like I do, so to steal a phrase from WWE superstar Daniel Bryan, yes, yes, yes! And I also know you are like me and you love the work Allen Robinson is putting out on the football field, but also off the field. That's why we're so pleased to partner with the Allen Robinson Within Reach Foundation. Their work provides educational opportunities and resources to low-income and inner-city Chicago students to help put success within reach. How can you help? Immediately you can visit allenrobinson12.org and learn more about what they are doing and make a donation. If you can't donate money, can you donate your time? The foundation is always looking for volunteers. And please let others know about their great work. In the coming weeks, the Barroom Network will hold some fundraising efforts, and we hope that you'll be a part of those. And again, let your family and friends know. Now, how about them Chicago Bears? I'm so psyched up for this season. I think A-Rob has 100 catches and double-digit touchdowns. Now let's bear down.
The following program is distributed by the Bears Barroom Radio Network. It's intended for all audiences. Draft on Tap with Danny Shimon and Niel Stopcynski.
Hey everyone, I am Aldo Gandia, and I am the president and founder of Bears Barroom, the Barroom Network. But over the next several months, leading all the way to the NFL draft, I'm going to be playing a different role on this show, Draft on Tap. I'm going to play the role of general manager of the Chicago Bears. The purpose is that I'm going to rely on the Barroom Scouts to help identify key players that could fit into the Chicago Bears scheme. Players that we should be paying attention to over their college senior seasons, or if they're underclassmen, their college final season before entering the draft. We want to help Ryan Pace identify the best players for the 2021 draft. Danny Shimon is with me here. Where are you, Danny? There you are.
I'm here. How are you, Aldo?
He is I'm fine. He is the chief draft scout of the Barroom Network. Danny, what do you think about the premise we got going?
I love it. I think when we got together, we talked about how we can make Draft on Tap more entertaining, more informative to our viewers, especially the Bears fans. Giving them more of a Bears angle. I thought, these scouts, and they get together with the head of operations, general managers, and whatnot, owners, and they kind of. I always heard the term pounding the table for a player. So That's what we're going to do here. We're going to bring that here this year to Draft on Tap. We're going to be going back and forth. You're going to tell us who you want, what position you want. We're going to give you names and players. And then myself and the new member of Draft on Tap we'll introduce here shortly. We're going to go back and forth and give you all the information. That way that we inform you, our general manager, and also our listeners as well.
I'll never forget the time that you were pounding on the table for a wide receiver out of Memphis a couple of years ago. His name happened to be Anthony Miller. And indeed, the Chicago Bears drafted him when they moved into the second round, traded back into the second round, and drafted Miller. You had identified him months ago as a potential prospect for the Chicago Bears. Nice job, brother.
Thanks. I wish they would listen to me when I was pounding the table for Deshaun Watson, but it's, it is what it is.
All right. You mentioned that we've got a new member on the team, and here he is now. Niel, how are you, brother?
I'm doing great, fellas. How about yourselves?
Doing great, man. We are so excited that you are part of the Draft on Tap show. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what makes you qualified to identify college prospects, and also your association with the Chicago Bears, your fandom with the Bears, so to speak.
Yeah, sure. First, I just want to thank you guys for bringing me on. I'm so amped up to do this project, work on this with you guys. I too was pounding the table for Deshaun Watson, just for the record. But I'm just looking forward to providing a lot of value to this show and having a lot of fun. I came from SEC country. I was at Mississippi State for the past 8 years. Most recently, the past 2 years, I was running NFL relations for the program. And so as the pro liaison, basically that is being the medium of communications between, the program and NFL personnel side of things. And so as the liaison, I take in all their phone calls. I set up their visits. I meet with them for 2 hours at a time, talking about the player's character, their backgrounds, their family, everything else, their playing history, setting up their meetings with everyone else around our side of personnel, be it the trainers, the strength staff, coaching staff, whoever it is that they may need to talk to. And organizing their film rooms, getting them out to practice, putting together the pro day, the rising senior day. I mean, it's a really organization intense job, and it's really helping these guys that have even more intense jobs than I do their jobs easier, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And so when I first got to Mississippi State, I got there in 2012, 8 years ago. And I was tasked with the responsibility of restructuring their scouting evaluation process, making it more efficient, making it more streamlined, bringing it into the millennium, and introducing more technological ways of doing things. And so I think we had some success. I mean, we had, the number one ranking for the first time in school history in 2014, excuse me. The past couple of years, we've had near 50 guys having opportunities to make their name in the league, whether it be as a draftee, whether it be as a free agent signing, getting invited to camps, whatever the case may be. So I think we did a lot of really good things in those 8 years at Mississippi State. And then prior to that, 2007 to 2012, I was at Northwestern wearing several hats in recruiting, operations, video services, all those types of things. And then I got my start 2 years prior to that in 2005 at my alma mater, Ball State, and specifically in recruiting.
It's quite the background you got there. And Danny and I talked to you over a period of, I guess, about a month or so to find out what your interest was in doing this project with us, and also, getting a feel for your scouting abilities. And we were really, really impressed. So we're very, very lucky to have you as part of the team. I know that Danny has really high expectations, so he's going to be pounding the table and arguing with you on a number of different topics as this thing goes
or
along.
agreeing. We could agree as well.
Yeah, we could agree.
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson.
There you go.
That's probably the only one for a while. No doubt about it. So to get started here, I thought it would be interesting for us to look back at the drafting history of Ryan Pace. Now, Ryan Pace is has had some hits with his draft picks with the Chicago Bears, but there's definitely been some misses. And his very first draft pick is considered a miss. And I put this video together. Ryan Pace's very first draft pick as general manager of the Chicago Bears was Kevin White, the wide receiver out of West Virginia. White had one phenomenal year in college, his senior year. He scored 10 touchdowns, caught 109 passes for over 1,400 yards. At the combine and at his pro day, he tested off the charts. But as a pro, Kevin White was a bust. Danny, what went wrong with Kevin White?
For me, Aldo, two things really. First thing obvious thing was the injuries. The injuries knocked out his first 3 seasons in the NFL, whether it was a stress fracture, the knee injury, and then finally was the broken clavicle. The kid just never got going. So that was one thing. Then the coaching change where Matt Nagy came in and he brought a whole new expanded playbook where he had anticipation in terms of the receivers. He wanted them to learn more in terms of all the positions, not just the X, the Z, and the slot. He wanted every receiver to learn every single route that the other receivers have to run as well. So I think that kind of broke the camel's back, and that's why it finally ended here with Kevin White. But on that video right there hit a key point. I think Kevin White, based off of his last season, his only good season, to be honest with you, in West Virginia, was slightly overdrafted. He came in with a feeling that he was going to be the thought was he was going to be a go-to number one receiver. However, if you go back and you take a look at his tape at West Virginia, no doubt, I mean, he had a great final season. He showed the burst to get upfield. He showed the ability to catch through contact. He showed the ability to go up and make contested catches. However, if you broke down his tape, you saw that this kid ran all about 4 or 5 routes in West Virginia's offense. About 2 or 3 of them were just straight up vertical routes. His feet, in terms of separating at the top of his route, he would chop his feet. So he was not a really good route runner. He was not someone that was ready to be a number 1 receiver in the NFL. And I think he came in with those expectations primarily because of that last season at West Virginia, what he did at the combine. Okay. And then, so he comes in with those expectations, being a top 7 pick. And then now, because on top of the injuries, I think that's what kind of everything just kind of curtailed on him. And it just ended up being, a big mess for him here in Chicago.
Niel, you kind of agree with Danny's evaluation of Kevin White and that perhaps he was overdrafted, or do you think that perhaps, he was worthy of being, the 7th overall pick of the draft, and it was just a matter of bad luck?
I think Danny's spot on with that. I think when you look at what Kevin White did in West Virginia, his sole purpose was to be an explosion play guy. He wasn't really he wasn't a gifted route runner. He wasn't really he wasn't coached up to be an all-around receiver that you really value in the NFL, especially as high picked as he is. Now, I mean, the whole idea of him blowing up the combine and that being kind of like a novelty, I think it's really careful not to be falling in love with combine performances. I always say that that combine should be used for affirmation, not confirmation. And what that means is that with all the resources and all the tape and everything else that a scout has throughout the course of the year, you should never go into a combine unless there is a very limited amount of tape or information and say, we need this combine to make our decision. And so what I'm saying about that is that, perhaps it was a little bit of falling in love with things that are real, but you go into the point to when he gets in Chicago, he has 3 years worth of injuries. It's sort of like, cutting off Samson's mane. You just take away the best thing that the guy has, which is his ability to run 4-3-5, take the top off the defense, and just really beat guys with speed. And he never was developed to be an all-around receiver. And so once you get to the point to where the injuries pile up, you take away the most explosive thing that he has, the best thing that he has to beat the defense. It's kind of over at that point. The crushing thing about that, though, is that getting to know that family. I wasn't as much involved in the recruitment of Kevin. I was more involved in the recruitment of Karan, and then very shortly thereafter, Kazir. And it's really interesting over the course of time, over 15 years of watching a family grow, a family of athletes grow. Typically, it's kind of like the rule of 3. The youngest is always the best. And who's still in the NFL? It's the linebacker.
Interesting. That's interesting. What is your philosophy, guys, on drafting wide receivers high up on the draft? Do you think that that's typically something that you should try to avoid because you can find athletes who can play the wide receiver position later in the first round and in other rounds? Or do you think that perhaps, you just evaluate the player, best player possible, best player available, no matter what position? Danny, what do you think?
Yep, exactly. Best player available, no matter where you are on the board, if it's number 1, if it's 15, if it's 32. If your best player available on the board is a receiver, then you go ahead and take them. Generally, I know what you mean, Aldo, in terms of first-round receivers. We've seen a lot more busts at that position than we do other positions, and you can find receivers in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. Just look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. It seems like every second-round receiver they pick turns out to be, a playmaker, an all-pro, so on and so forth. So, but in terms of my draft evaluation, and especially if I'm running a draft room, if it's best player available, obviously if I have a quarterback, if I have a Patrick Mahomes, and my best player available on the board is a Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback, I'm looking to see if there's ways I can get more draft picks, because I'm not going to take a quarterback and sit behind Patrick Mahomes right now. But, generally, though, typically, if you're going to be going through the draft, the first round of a draft especially, you take best player available, no matter, what your needs are.
You feel the same way, Niel? In a way.
I think you also have to be conscious of the needs, too. And I also feel that the wide receiver position is being one that's being very oversaturated. Meaning that you can't find a really good guy and be held to less guaranteed money on that individual. Generally, I always feel like the war in the trenches is always the most important war to win, and so you should always build and always find the best guy, the best big athletic dude you can find. And so therefore, I'm always going to err on the side of finding big dudes in the first round versus maybe just the best overall player.
Right. If you're coming down and your top players on the board are an offensive lineman or defensive tackle or a receiver, I agree with Niel. You always build in the trenches. You get your defensive lineman, you get your offensive lineman, and then you can always come back down and get a receiver. You can always try back up into the first round. If you love a guy so much, you can always wait to see if he drops to you. But yeah, you always build your team up front with the offensive and defensive lines.
I will say though, if you find a unicorn like Julio Jones, feel free to go ahead and take him.
Yeah, but what has Julio Jones done in terms of he's make all pros, but he doesn't help his team win every Sunday.
All right. That's
the thing.
And so do you think that Ryan Pace has made a mistake since he's been the general manager of the Bears at not identifying offensive linemen in round one, or are you happy with the fact that he's identified guys like James Daniels in round two?
Is that for me or for Niel?
Why don't we start with you, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of identifying first-round offensive linemen, obviously, Ryan Pace took over a roster that was barren of talent. Okay, I think the only two players left on this roster that Phil Emery brought in are Kyle Fuller and O'Donnell, the punter. I mean, this roster was a complete overhaul. Ryan Pace, I think, has he had some misses? Yes, but I think he's done a nice job of filling in this roster. He's developed a team or built a team that won a division championship a couple of years ago and one that's sitting right now at 3-0. What I think he's done is he has not taken an offensive lineman in the first round, but he has done a nice job of finding Cody Whitehair in the second round, James Daniels in the second round. He brings in offensive free agents or like Bobby Massey. So he has filled around him, a free agent like Jermaine Ifedi. So he's filled in around him. Now, would I like to see him take an offensive lineman? Not just take one to take one. I would like to see him take one that's actually gifted and someone that can come in and help right away. And that might be something he could do this year, because he's got the first round pick back this year from the Khalil Mack trade. That's all done and paid off. I don't care what Jason Lecofora says, but so if this coming draft, if an offensive lineman is the top rated player on this board, I don't think he's opposed to taking offensive lineman in the first round.
Mm-hmm. You disagree at all with anything that Danny just presented, Niel?
Not at all. I think that way too often we could be overly critical of a GM that maybe might make the first round miss. But I think where you find your value, like Danny said, is like later on in the draft, even the mid rounds, you find some serious value for a very low amount of guaranteed money, and that's where you fill in your roster. That's where you find your diamonds.
All right, a year after the Kevin White acquisition, Mr. Pace went to the well again, finding a very athletic player. And I followed this report. When Ryan Pace laid eyes on Georgia linebacker Leonard Floyd, he thought the 6'6" backer was the right fit to help fulfill his vow to make the Bears more athletic. Floyd's sack numbers in college were average, but his speed and versatility were far above average. At the Combine, Floyd confirmed the athletic traits. In the pros, though, Floyd could never master the art of the pass rush. He's a miss. Niel, I didn't want to call Leonard Floyd a bust because he had 7 sacks in his first season. He had some injury problems. He wasn't a player like Kevin White, who rarely saw any action. He saw plenty of action after that a slow start because of injuries. And he was he paid off in certain respects, but he was never the pass rusher that the Bears thought they were getting, which ended up forcing them to acquire Khalil Mack. Your thoughts on Leonard Floyd?
I have 2 thoughts on that. First off is ever since high school, I could almost guarantee, make a very big argument that his weight was always inflated. And what that means is that, these media sites will always tell you, oh, this kid is 6'7", 211 pounds. I could probably argue that he was probably more like 6'4", 195 playing his senior year in high school. Okay. And so, as a kid coming in, playing, like an outside rush end, inside linebacker, he played multiple positions at Georgia. He was never really trained to do one thing very well. He was never a prototypical outside rush guy, even though they wanted to sell him as hard as they possibly could that he is that guy. And so I think you couple a few things together. He was a non-qualifier out of high school, had to go to Hargraves. you have a red flag there as to, is he just not into school? Is he kind of lazy on that aspect of things? Or is he just mentally sort of a little bit slower to learn? And so as a scout, that's a red flag right there. You have to get answered. Secondly, play multiple positions in college, not really trained to do one thing very well, is when you have a situation where a guy that's probably been listed on a depth chart at 235 pounds, probably playing his sophomore junior year at 215 pounds, having put on a lot of weight before the combine. Remember, he checked into the combine at 231 pounds, which I think surprised a lot of people. And then you get to the pro day and he's 244. He was never able to sustain that weight, though. You look at the kid's body type. He's long, he's skinnier built, especially in the hips. And it's really hard for a guy like that, especially if he's a hard gainer, to sustain the amount of weight that it takes to be a threat off the edge in the NFL. Typically, you want that guy to be between like 250 and 260. But if he's 235 pounds, 238, 240, or even less, he's going to get tossed around like a rag doll with bigger, stronger, more athletic dudes. And you go back to the whole ability to pick up, schemes, ability to learn positions at a faster rate of pace. I'm not so sure that he was ever that guy.
Danny, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Niel, and it's an aspect of, for me, Leonard Floyd was brought here to be Vic Fangio's Aldon Smith. And Fangio had a tremendous amount of success in San Francisco with Aldon Smith. So he was a lanky, tall edge rusher with long arms and a quick first burst, and that's what Floyd had. However, just like Niel said, Leonard Floyd was not a pass rusher at Georgia. Leonard Floyd was a defensive playmaker. I equate him to someone similar to last year's draft and Isaiah Simmons. Now, Isaiah Simmons is a better overall athlete. Isaiah Simmons can play safety. Isaiah Simmons can cover receivers on the slot. But Leonard Floyd was the same kind of playmaker in the front seven. He's a guy that lined up as a middle linebacker. He lined up as an outside linebacker. He rarely lined up with his hand in the ground. He was out there in a 2-point stance rushing, and they utilized his first quick step, his burst to get to the quarterback, and again, his long arms and his long limbs to be able to make up ground quickly and get there and make some pressure, disrupt the pocket and get that quarterback out of there. However, he was never a pass rusher. He had no pass rush repertoire. So when he was coming in as a kid that was going to, they had the mold there, and they're going to just go ahead and make him into a pass rusher. Unfortunately, it just never panned out. He became a really reliable run defender. He was a guy who always played hard on the edge and always was able to funnel the run back into his big guys in the middle of the defensive line. But in terms of putting it all together as a pass rusher, he just was never someone who did it. And unfortunately, that first year you mentioned, although he had 7 sacks, it looked like, this guy was going to, pan out for the Bears, but it just ended up, I think that was a high sack total he had with the Bears in his tenure. So after those 7 sacks, I think this last season was 3 sacks, and now he's out and he's playing for the Chargers or the Rams.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
I just want to piggyback off that real quick. Like you said one thing that I remember back during the recruiting process and back during college, Leonard Floyd was always a dude that looked at himself as a high motor guy. And that played very well into what his role was. And so, yeah, you're getting a high motor guy, you're getting a really athletic dude, you're getting all those things, but it's just, it doesn't work if you're trying to sort of, put that guy in a vacuum and play one position.
The interesting thing also is that what we've seen from Ryan Pace's first 2 round 1 draft picks are highly, highly athletic players. And he told the media, he told Chicago Bears fans that he wanted this team to be very athletic. Do you think that perhaps Pace was overlooking certain attributes needed in football players because he was so focused on how these guys looked in shorts and how they did at the combine? Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, and I was going to touch on this point as we got along with some of the other draft picks as well. But yes, especially in the first round, it's obvious Ryan Pace has a profile. He wants his pass rushers tall, lanky, long arms, quick first burst, and he's got athletic. He wants guys that have athletic traits that fulfill whatever he's looking for at a position. All of his first round picks generally are very good to high quality athletes. So that's his first thing he goes for in in the first round. He goes for athletes first, and then if they play football, if they're an athletic kid, he feels like their football staff can go and coach them up and make them better. But if they're just a hard-nosed football player, he sees a ceiling and a floor, and he wants guys with high ceilings.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, going back to one of the things I was touching on when we were talking about Kevin White, be careful to fall in love with guys, during the Underwear Olympics. I think that there's a lot more that goes into it from a standpoint of technique and attention to detail and just doing the little things right that makes you a better football player than just being able to jump fast and run high.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go on to Ryan Pace's next draft pick. And this one was one that really kind of broke my heart a bit because I had been hearing a lot, didn't see any tape on this player at all because it was really difficult to come by. But I had been reading a lot about this guy's potential, and it just didn't pan out. Watching Adam Shaheen's college tape, and you immediately think that he's a man among boys. Then you realize that the 6'6", 277-pound tight end is among boys, Division II boys. Shaheen, a second-round draft pick, is another Ryan Pace first-class bust. Danny, your thoughts on Adam Shaheen, the football player, and Ryan Pace's selection of him as high up as the second round?
Yeah, Adam Shaheen, I was in the same boat with you. I'd heard his name, heard the scuttlebutt about this kid from Ashland College, and I didn't even know what Ashland College was at the time, to be honest with you. And then, but the scouts were raving about him. He's 6'6", ran a 4.79 40 at 278 pounds, and everyone's talking about baby Gronk and all that stuff. And I think what Ryan Pace saw in him was, again, an athletic kid, a big kid. I think he kind of reminded him of a Jimmy Graham type with New Orleans, Jimmy Graham from New Orleans, because he had Shaheen has a basketball background. He saw him as a guy in the red zone who'd be a nice, big target for his quarterback, a guy who could box out defenders and go up and make the catch and just, score touchdowns. So the fact that, again, he was an athletic kid who ran, pretty good for a guy that size, with a background in basketball, I think he saw him as his Jimmy Graham here. And I think that's why he went so high for him.
Niel, I know that you didn't really see much of Adam Shaheen, any of his college tape, but you saw him play a bit with the Chicago Bears. What was your impression? I mean, he got the nickname of Baby Gronk. Did you see any attributes in Adam Shaheen while he wore a Chicago Bears uniform that you would have said, yeah, I see a little bit of the Gronk in him?
Saw a bit of him is probably the most accurate thing you said about Adam Shaheen. I mean, he's a guy that was really drafted for a different scheme. Mm-hmm. He was brought in during Fox's last year, and Fox has a little bit more of a power scheme, a little more run-heavy scheme. I would think he was brought in to be more of that 250-pound, 260-pound Y off the end of the line, really getting after linebackers' asses. The thing about Adam Shaheen too is kind of the same way with Kevin White. Injuries just crushed the kid. I have in my notes he had a chest, he had an ankle, concussions, feet. I mean, he could never. His whole thing too is he would say all the time, he's like, I can't figure out a way to find an equilibrium in my lower body in order to be effective until I just get fully healthy. And so he struggled with all of that. Just first from being put into a system that he wasn't ready for, and then Nagy comes in and Trey Burton becomes kind of like a superstar at flex tight end position, and that's really not what he was brought in to be. I don't think. I think it's brought to be more of like a physical presence that could, go ahead and run some routes and just dominate, smaller dudes in the red zone.
Let me ask you guys, when you're looking at Division II players and guys like Adam Shaheen, obviously the physicals are always left to the doctors and trainers and so forth. But as scouts, do you look for certain things in the film and tape to kind of help you ascertain whether the guy, the player, the athlete can withstand the punishment of the NFL, particularly, again, these Division II players who aren't going up against, guys from the Big Ten who are bigger and stronger and faster? Danny, let me start with you. Do you do anything in tape evaluation to help you kind of determine a player's physicality?
Well, the first thing I do when I watch a small school kid of Division II or FCS is I try not to find out what number he is, and I try to see if he sticks out on tape for me. I'm like, all right, is this guy's making some plays? Is this the guy I'm looking for? And then I confirm it. And once I've confirmed it, then I look for traits that I can project at the next level. And we're talking about physical traits, size, speed, strength. Does he have that? Is he lacking any of that? Because if he has all that, he should probably be dominating it at his Division II or FCS level. So that's the things I look at. And how does he project? Is he a guy that's got the size speed ratio but lacks strength? Is a guy that has size and strength but lacks, physical, athletic ability. So that's how you project them at the next level. But typically, these guys should pop on tape because, like you said, they're playing with guys that are not at the next Power 5 level, at the Division I level of football players. So they should pop on tape. You should be able to see them. Now, if you put a tape on a kid and he doesn't do anything for you, it doesn't stick out for you, that tells me that that's some guy that I'm not really high on.
Any thoughts on that topic?
Couldn't have said any better. It's kind of the same thing as if you're looking at a high school kid projecting him to Power 5 football. He's got to be out there dominating the competition. A D2 kid coming into the NFL should be out there dominating the competition. Now, he set all kinds of records at Ashland, and that's fine. But, there's certain things that, Adam Shaheen had that just did not fit.
And I have a couple of examples for you, Aldo. For example, like last year, Kyle Duggar. It's a school. I forget the school's name, but it was
something like that. Yeah.
Thank you. He was a talk of the draft. Everyone's hyping him up. We went down to the Senior Bowl, and I saw him. The guy's a physical specimen. The guy can run. The guy is big. The guy can hit. The guy's strong. But I put on his tape, and he didn't pop for me. And everyone in the country was loving this kid, but he didn't pop for me. I think he ended up going in the second round to the Patriots, if I'm not mistaken. But I just, that's someone that to me that doesn't stick out. And I think he should have dominated that level. And the games I watched six of his games. And not at one point, did he make tackles? Yeah. Was he coming downhill aggressively and tackling a quarterback or a running back and making a tackle? But he's a safety. And those are the things I expect him to make. He didn't do anything that stood out for me in terms of this guy's going to be a next level safety in NFL. On the opposite is a kid on the Bears practice squad, Steven Denmark, Valdosta State. When I they first drafted him, I didn't know who he was. I went and I found out some tape on him, and the kid popped. Whether as a receiver, because he was converted receiver from a receiver to corner, but his athletic traits popped on tape. This guy's 6'2", 6'3", 230 some pounds, but he runs a 4.4 40. He jumps a 40-inch vertical, and that kind of stuff. You see it on tape. You see it in his game film. This guy's making plays and he's popping. So, and again, Kyle Duggar's in the NFL right now playing for the Patriots while Steven Denmark's on the Bears practice squad. However, those are, two examples of guys that I thought, are two opposites, polar opposites. Guy gets drafted high. However, it doesn't pop for me, but a guy who does excite me on tape is on a practice squad. So we'll see how that turns out. And, where that happens in both guys' careers. But those are some prime examples of recent history of guys that I saw everyone else liked, I just didn't like. And some guys, some guy I saw that I liked. And again, now he's just trying to make a roster.
Excellent stuff, gentlemen. All right. The next player on my list here is one that a week ago I might not have had on this list. Let's take a look. 7 weeks after Ryan Pace signed Mike Glennon to be his number one quarterback, he shocked the NFL by drafting Mitchell Trubisky out of North Carolina. Trubisky was a one-year starter, and he wowed many scouts with his performance in that 1 year. But in Chicago, the wows have been few and far in between, and just last week, Trubisky was benched in favor of NFL journeyman Nick Foles. Trubisky is Pace's biggest bust yet. Niel, am I being too hard on Ryan Pace by saying that Mitch Trubisky is his biggest bust?
Well, I think that I will never talk bad about a GM or a scout that ultimately trusts their evaluation. They go out and get who they want. All right. Especially in the quarterback position that is so scrutinized. It is probably the highest stress position to go ahead and draft, especially as high as you draft someone like Mitch Trubisky. I think there's certain things that were worrisome about that though. And I think that is another example of Ryan Pace being infatuated with a flash in the pan guy. He had 13. Mitch Trubisky had 13 starts as his entire college career. which makes him the highest drafted player with the lowest number of starts from quarterback position ever, I believe. And he sat behind a guy that his name is Marquise Williams for 2 years. And Marquise Williams wasn't exactly, Ronald Curry. He wasn't exactly, the kid that went to Texas and started playoff games. He's Marquise Williams was a nice player that had a shot in the league, ended up playing, a couple years in the CFL, and who knows what he's doing now. And so, it's hard to put a lot of faith in a guy, to me, that has only 13 starts, that couldn't win out the job against a guy who's not playing the league right now. And maybe that's just because he's a late bloomer. Those kinds of things happen. But I will credit Pace in having a spine on his decision, getting who you want, being convicted in his opinions and in his evaluation. I think at all times you have to trust your evaluation, because if you keep on flip-flopping, you end up, having some other, bad draft picks later on in the draft. But I think it's also key to consider that a lot of scouts in this draft sort of equated Mitch Trubisky to a guy like Jake Locker, a guy that was sort of a flash in the pan guy, had some big games, showed a lot of traits that could equate to the NFL, but it just never happened. Got picked very high and flamed out. And when you consider that, it was a horrendous draft that year. There were 3 guys that played. And it was the 3 guys we keep on, comparing week after week after week. We should have taken Mahomes. We should have taken, Deshaun Watson. I think that there was some legitimate interest in Deshaun Watson. I think there was also some rumors floating around that there were certain physical traits of Deshaun Watson that they weren't very keen on. That he was slight in certain areas, that they're worried about the ACL, about his longevity. And so I think that when you put all that together, taking Trubisky, a guy that they vetted out to the nth degree, and just getting a guy that they wanted before anybody else could have a chance to get them, it eliminated a lot of buyer's remorse.
Danny, what do you think about what Niel just said and the overall evaluation of Trubisky?
Well, Niel was right in terms of Trubisky. And some of the things I had, some of the concerns I had about Trubisky coming in was just a 1-year starter, and some of the things that plagued them in college, still plague them now. And that's not seeing the coverages, especially zone. The underneath defender always catches him. It seems like he pops out of nowhere and intercepts a pass from him. He did a lot of one read plays in North Carolina. What that means is he just got back and just looked at his primary target and threw the ball to his primary target. And the positives about him are still his positives, which is his athletic ability. His ability to get out away from pressure, can get out on the open field. He can use his legs as a weapon as you saw last week with a big 45-yard run versus the Atlanta Falcons. He's an athletic kid. This kid, for me, with Trubisky's issues are all from the neck up. Physically, he's got it. He's good size at 6'2", 200 plus pounds. Like I said, he's athletic. He's got a strong arm. He can make all the throws. But for him, it's processing the game. He's still not able to process it pre-snap and post-snap at the rate and the speed that it requires NFL quarterbacks to process this game. Now, Niel touched on it. Will he get it? There have been some quarterbacks in the past that have been late bloomers. For some reason, that light clicks on later on. They're in stages of their career, and next thing you know, now they're identifying defenses. They're seeing where their coverages are shading them to, and they're knowing how to attack coverages. Will that ever happen to Trubisky? It might, but I think his time here in Chicago has come to an end, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, Danny. What I see on the football field is a guy who has been given every opportunity to master Matt Nagy's offense and even a slimmed down version of his offense, because I don't really believe that Matt Nagy has gone to many of the pages of his playbook, because he's tried to dumb things down in an effort to help his quarterback. And that's been incredibly frustrating for Matt Nagy, because he truly believes that he's got a great playbook, but he doesn't have a great quarterback to master that playbook and to fully execute game plans against particular teams. So I think that was why it only took 3 games for us to take a look at Nick Foles stepping into this quarterback position. He's a guy that knows this playbook. He's a guy that can execute the playbook at a very high level. And Niel, I'll ask you, what are your expectations for Nick Foles in this upcoming game Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts.
I think the one thing that I noticed about Nick is that he stepped in the game and he was just ready to crush it. You know, he just had that look about him. He had the eyes. He had the persona. He had the body language. Mitch, in the second half of that game last week, you saw the deer in the headlights. You saw the wheels. You look at the one camera shot. It went like straight into his eyes. You saw the wheels turning. That's a problem. 4 years in, it's a problem. You know, Nick Foles, it seems like he's come in, he's picked everything up at a very fast pace, and he's ready to go. I don't really have a whole lot of concerns of Nick Foles operating an offense like Nagy's.
And I think you just said right there, Niel, is something, Aldo, you and I were talking about 2 years ago in Nagy's first season with Trubisky. How many times did we see him when he struggled? He had that deer in the headlights look. He looked confused. He looked like he was being overwhelmed. So what happens is he has so much information. He's processing it in his mind, and he's playing slow. His reaction time out there on the field is slow. And with an NFL quarterback, things happen so quick that you got to react quickly. And that's why you have to be able to read defensive coverages pre-snap. You have to line up your protection. Then you have to post-snap once you've got the ball. You have to then recognize, were they disguising anything pre-snap defensively? Now, where do I attack? How do I attack them? And this all happens in split seconds. That it's just, for him, like I said, it's neck up. Physically, Trubisky has everything I think he needs to be successful in the NFL. It's just, will he be able to ever process the game at a rate that's quick enough for these successful NFL quarterbacks?
I'll tell you one thing. I wish him well, because by all accounts, he's a great, great guy.
Oh, that's the thing. The guy is a hard worker. He's the first guy in, last guy out. His teammates love him. They will run through a wall for him. And you feel bad. You wish this kid can get it. And as you saw last week, when he got benched, defensive players, Kyle Fuller, Khalil Mack, all these guys are coming up to him and kind of tapping him, saying, "Keep your head up. You know, don't be down about this," and all that stuff. His teammates love him. It's just a matter of, can he get it? And then one thing you guys touched on is Matt Nagy feels like Mitch Trubisky was holding his offense back. That you can't tell me that interception against Atlanta was the only reason that he benched him. He was just waiting for a reason to bench him. He wanted Nick Foles from the beginning, but he probably was just said, you know what, I'll give him one more shot to prove me wrong. And he just said, you know what, this is it. Enough's enough. And he just made the change. Now, just be warned, Nick Foles has only started, I think the most games he started in the season is 11. All right. So, Nick Foles is not the most, durable quarterback out there. So this might not be the end of Mitch Trubisky. So what I would tell him if I was advising him would be, a lot of players have sat back on the bench and watched a veteran go in there and run the same offense that they were struggling running with. And a lot of times that helps them mature and get better and kind of understand what's going on. So, if Foles goes down, Trubisky has to be ready to step in there and then reclaim that job. So, it's not the total end for Mitch Trubisky here in Chicago. It's not it's bleak, but just so our listeners, there's a chance that Trubisky could be back out there, and I just hope that he does sit back and watch Nick Foles run this offense, because Nick Foles came in off the bench and he threw 3 touchdown passes. Should have been 5 touchdown passes in the second half last week. So obviously Nick Foles knows his offense. He knows the one thing about Nick Foles that tells me that this guy can run an NFL offense, or can run this offense especially, is that play to Anthony Miller, where he told Miller, he goes, "I'm probably not going to see me complete this ball, but you get to the L in the Falcons end zone, I'll throw it there." And so that's what I talked about when I scout quarterbacks. I want to see quarterbacks lead receivers away from coverage, throw them open, if you will. And that's what I mean by that. He just threw it to a spot. He told Miller to get there. Miller got there, and there you go, touchdown.
Neil, we've got a question up on the screen. I'd love to get your opinion on it. Do you think that Nagy's play calling suits Mitch's strengths? Do you think that perhaps under a different offensive system, Mitch Trubisky could play at a high NFL level?
Well, I think we saw what he did at North Carolina was what he's really comfortable at doing, running something very up-tempo, allowing him to use his athletic ability, very easy progressions and reads. When he was doing that in 2018, and when he was productive so far this year, that there's a few quarters where he's been a very productive player, and he does need a clean pocket in order to produce. When he's given the ability to go ahead and use his athletic ability and to keep things simple, and we have an offensive line that's able to keep guys from putting him on his back, he can execute the offense. It's just he gets so clustered. he gets so flustered when the pocket turns into a cluster. I think that's the entire problem with him. And I think, what Danny said, there's plenty of guys in this league that have, sat behind, more experienced guys and just sort of watched it happen. And a lot of times, a lot of times that's all guys need. So hopefully, he's able to keep his head in the game. He's able to, stay focused because, like you touched on, Nick has never started a full season before.
Anthony on the screen writes, Mitch has no strengths. It's all negated by his incompetence and inconsistency. His mechanics are like he got drafted out of North Carolina yesterday. And there are some issues, of course, with Trubisky's mechanics. I saw it in his college tape. He had that poor footwork. He had that left foot opening wide, pointing to the left of a lot of targets. He got away with it at North Carolina. It's something that he just could not get away with at the pro level. We saw him go to a quarterback guru coach to help him with his mechanics during this off season. And it appeared that there were some minor improvements, but at the same time, he would always kind of go back every once in a while to those mechanical mistakes because muscle memory is such a difficult thing to correct. Danny, what do you think about his mechanics? Do you think at any point he can become a regular, a competent mechanical quarterback?
I don't know if he'll ever become a competent mechanical quarterback. I mean, some quarterbacks right now that are successful in the NFL have some crappy mechanics, but you know what? They can get away with it. They've come to play with it. I mean, Philip Rivers' mechanics in terms of his arm angle and the way he throws the football, it looks like he's shot putting the ball. A lot of times he's throwing off his back foot and all that stuff, but he's been successful in the NFL. The one thing with Mitch Trubisky though is, and the question earlier that was posed to Niel in terms of has Matt Nagy played to his strengths? I don't think Matt Nagy has played to his strengths. I think we're seeing what offense Mitch Trubisky would be successful in. Just look at Tennessee, guys. Look at Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill was in a similar boat with Trubisky. He was a high draft pick. He was a highly athletic quarterback. Now he was a converted receiver to quarterback, so he had more of a transition, if you will, to the position. But look what Tennessee's doing with him now. They've built a system around his strengths and a strong running game. You give Trubisky a strong running game. You give him the option to be able to roll out, use his feet, and throw simple passes. Don't complicate things for him. And I think he's a guy that could flourish in a system just like the Tennessee Titans system.
I agree. I think that Nagy has not valued the run game enough. And that's something that, when we were successful in 2018, it's definitely valued a hell of a lot more than it has been the past couple of years.
All right, guys, let's move on now to the next part of our show. We want to talk a little bit about what your assessment is of this upcoming draft. And not only the seniors, but guys that you project are juniors, underclassmen that are probably at a point in their college career where they might be eyeing getting into the NFL. So what are the strengths of this upcoming draft? And we had a question in the chat room from Steven. He wanted us to talk about, let me see if I can find it and put it up on the screen. Can you do a weekly preview scouting report of college players that fit the Bears scheme in the upcoming the previous week and the upcoming week going forward? So, Stephen, that is essentially what this show is going to be all about. We're going to be scouting players. And when I say we, I mean Niel and Danny. They're going to be scouting players and looking at them through the lens of the Chicago Bears needs, Chicago Bears, how they would fit into the Chicago Bears scheme. But right now, what we're going to do is just kind of get their assessment as to where the strengths are with this draft and where are the weaknesses. Danny, let me begin with you and your thoughts.
Well, my initial thoughts on this draft in terms of strengths, the position-wise, I got to start off with receiver. I mean, last year we had 6 receivers going the first round. I can easily see 6 or more going again in this upcoming draft. So, I mean, we have guys like Jamar Chase, and we have Rashard Bateman, we have Justin Ross, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, and list goes on and on and on. So I think receiver is a position that's strong again this year's draft. I think offensive line, if you combine the offensive tackles and the offensive guards, I think that has a nice core there that you can draft at least first, second round, possibly into third round. We'll see how some other guys play and they develop in this upcoming season as well. I think a linebacker, which I think is great for the Bears because I think Bears have a tremendous need at linebacker, both inside and more so inside right now, but there's a nice mixture of inside and outside linebackers that I see on defense. And I like defensive backs. I like this corners. I like the safeties in this draft. We're going to get into the Bears' needs later on, but I think safety is still a need for this team moving forward.
Very much agreed. If you look at a lot of mock drafts kicking around on the internet right now, you see a ton of wide receivers and you see a ton of offensive linemen projected in the first 32 picks. I think there is a tremendous value in the mid area of the draft with offensive linemen as well. And as I mentioned earlier, you always have to improve in the trenches. And I think that this offensive line that we have right now is not bad. I think there's some quality players there. I think we always need to get better, especially on the edges. But yeah, there are some interior guys in this draft right now, and they always seem to be coming from Alabama for some reason. But I think there's like 3 projected first round picks out of Alabama right now. But offensive line, defensive line, I think you look at what our defensive line looks at right now with only Akeem Hicks inside, and we're missing Eddie Goldman tremendously. And so from a depth standpoint, we don't have anybody that could really fill his void. I think that we would not be in a bad shape if we took another interior defensive lineman high. You look at Danny Trevathan with his bizarre drop this year, how he looks like he just lost like 2 steps, and I don't know how you explain that. So interior backer, I think should be a pretty high priority need once we go forward. Unfortunately, where I don't see a whole lot of depth is quarterback. I think that's a tremendous problem in a situation where we are right now. Now, I do think that signing Nick Foles was the best insurance policy this team has ever gone into. But if you're someone that's hoping that we take somebody in this draft that can toss some touchdown passes, you start to wonder how much draft capital do you have to go ahead and sacrifice and move up and get a guy.
Biggest areas that are weak. Danny, you agree with Niel's assessment on the quarterback?
Yeah, the quarterback position for me, there's 4 guys I'm excited about. There's possibly a 5th guy. We can get into them as we talk about quarterbacks later on. But yeah, there's 4 to 5 guys, and the rest of them are just a crapshoot. I mean, there's some out there that I like. There's some of their traits, but some of their decision making, that some of the things they do in terms of their schemes and their systems, it just doesn't translate nicely to me now. Could they improve? Could we have a possible Joe Burrow, this year come out a guy who was, going into last year, a day 3 pick, a 4th round pick for me at least. And it ends up going all the way up to the first pick in the draft. So, could we have something come of that? We could. There are a couple of candidates already that you kind of look at and like, all right, these guys have a possibility. But yeah, in terms of, the quarterback position, there's 4 guys that I absolutely like. There's a 5th guy, possible 5th guy we can talk about, but everybody else is just a crapshoot.
Now, from a contract standpoint, the Bears could be in some problems here because we still don't know what the cap is going to look like, and it's probably either going to be flat or more likely it's going to be reduced because of the pandemic and revenues are going to be down and so forth. So we have seen on average a $10 million jump in the cap every year for the last several years, but doesn't look like there's going to be any jump at all, and it could be more like $10 million under. So the Bears have some really big contracts dedicated to defensive players between Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Kyle Fuller, and
Eddie Jackson.
And Eddie Jackson. We're talking about close to 30% of the payroll for next season. So we might have to release certain players. And then looking at the player contracts, 2 players who are on the bubble, so to speak, are the offensive tackles. Bobby Massey and Charles Leno Jr. are 2 potential players that could be released to free up some money to sign a quarterback if you need to sign a quarterback. If you have to, for instance, franchise Nick Foles because he plays well, he's got an option out of his contract, and if he decides to exercise that option, and the Bears would not re-sign Mitchell Trubisky as their number 1 quarterback. So they'd have to either franchise Nick Foles. And so there is potentially a $30 million gone there. So let's look at the offensive tackles. Niel, you say that this draft offers some possibilities at the tackle position?
Yeah, I think that if you look around some of the big schools, the SEC has a few guys. Once we see the Big Ten start to play, we'll get a good idea. I'm not sure really what we have out west yet. I don't think the NFL right now, talking to some guys the past couple of weeks, they're very excited about really a whole lot going on out in the Pac-12. But I think once we really get it further into the season, we get more game tape on a lot of these big boys like at Alabama. Mississippi State has a couple guys. LSU might have a couple guys. I think once we really get more tape, we're going to be able to really get some good evaluations down and figure out who can actually work in this offense.
Yeah, and Danny, I think that the Chicago Bears and Ryan Pace and his team were thinking about the possible replacements for those tackles with those two players they picked up in the 7th round, Arlington Hambright being one of them. Have you had a chance to look at tape of Arlington Hambright and to assess whether it's even possible that he could potentially become a starter in 2021?
Hambright, for me, played left tackle at Colorado, but for me, he projects better inside as a guard. He's an athletic kid. He moves well laterally, side to side. He's got some physical limitations in terms of strength, so he's probably going to be in that training room and that weight program getting stronger this year. But for me, he's more of an interior player, more of a guard. Even Simmons, the kid from a Tennessee Tech or Tennessee State, he's a guy that played tackle, but I think he's going to probably someone that either flips to the right side or probably more so inside. But he's got a mean streak, Simmons that is, and he's a guy that plays mean, and I like those offensive linemen that go ahead and finish their blocks. But getting to this year's draft, first of all, replacing both your tackles in the same season is a little, going with like younger guys is a little scary for me, especially if you have a guy like Nick Foles who's not very mobile. Who if he gets hit the wrong way, could be out for a very long time. So if you're going to go ahead and take a hit, you're probably going to go whichever one of those kids makes the most money. But I would think Massey might be the guy that takes the hit. And so then now you're going to look for an offensive right tackle. And at a kid like Penei Sewell from Oregon, he's a big guy. He's a guy that's going to be projected to go in the top 5, top 10. Obviously, the Pac-12 is coming back, but I think he's already opted out due to COVID concerns. So he's not going to be playing this season, but he's a guy that was projected to be the first tackle taken. He's a guy that plays left tackle. But again, if you bring someone like that in, we're talking about a high draft pick here. So we're bringing someone like that and you put him on the right side, until Leno's contract situation clears up, or until his play warrants you to make that flip over to the young kid over to the left side, and then you move on from there. But we're talking about Penei Sewell from Oregon. Samuel Cosme, a tackle from Texas, is a very interesting kid. He's a guy that plays left tackle right now for Texas, but he's more of an athletic guy. And I see him more of an interior guy in terms of a guard. So we'll see how that pans out this season as I watch more of him. Walker Little from Stanford. He's a guy that got hurt last year, was a highly regarded kid last year. He came back for his senior year, and he's a kid that also plays left tackle, but it could also project over to the right side as well. Elric Jackson, the kid from Iowa. Although you and I saw him last year playing against Northwestern, he's a guy that Tristan Wirfs was just drafted in the first round by the Buccaneers, and I think Elric Jackson is a guy who I had higher rated than Tristan Wirfs coming into the last year. But Wirfs ended up going in because Jackson got hurt. So Wirfs ended up playing some left tackle, some right tackle, and he ended up going in the first round. Jackson came back. So that's a guy to keep an eye on, is Elric Jackson from Iowa at left tackle. And then Niel talked about Alabama, the kid, the left tackle, like Alex Leatherwood. He's a guy that also can play a right or left tackle, a big physical specimen, athletic kid for a guy that size. So another kid to keep an eye on is Leatherwood from Alabama. So those are just some of the names. But like I said, the tackle and the guard position, I like the depth early on going into this season at those two positions. And I guess those are positions that the Bears have needs in.
And it helps to have a guy like Juan Castillo as an offensive line coach who is quickly proving that the reputation he came into town with is legitimate, because the improved offensive line play that I've seen in these first 3 games for the Chicago Bears, clearly Castillo is responsible for that. The improved play at the tackle position and the cohesion in the middle of the line. I'm just very impressed by that. You agree with that, Niel?
100%. Like I touched on earlier, Mitch has had a better and more productive year this year than he has last year because he has had more of a clean pocket.
Right.
He's been able to think clearly and make easier plays, make easier reads. I'm not sure I've seen a cleaner pocket for Mitch this year, and now for Foles than I have this year so far.
So Danny, when you're looking at drafting players, do you think about let's say, for instance, you were in the general manager position. Do you think at all about, maybe I'll put a higher priority on drafting an offensive lineman because I've got a coach like Juan Castillo who can quickly turn this guy into a starter? Is that something that goes into the thinking process?
I just go off of what my coaching staff tells me and what my needs, my scouting department tells me in terms of my needs are. Going back to the Bears offensive line right now, if you take a look at that offensive line, I think that interior has been playing stout, has been playing phenomenal. I mean, no one's talked about James Daniels, and I don't know if it's Juan Castillo or what, but James Daniels is a different player this year, guys. He's out there, he's showing his athletic ability, being able to get out to the second level, get to that second level run fit, and he's literally wiping guys off the screen there. He's playing angry, he's playing mean. If you take a look at this guy, watch the all 22, he's standing around, he's looking for help. He's looking to hit people, and he goes around and he's just burying guys left and right, guys that don't know what the hell is going on with him. He's just like a totally man possessed out there. So I don't know if it's Castillo, if it's just the lights going on here and James Daniels, but he's one heck of a player. He's turned into one heck of a player this year. And that interior with white hair, and Jermaine Ifedi, I know he had I think it was a penalty this year or last week, a couple of penalties there, but right. Another guy is a physical point of attack blocker, a guy who can move people off their spot. And I think that's why we've seen it, predominantly. We talked about protection in terms of Mitch and the quarterbacks, but look at Montgomery, look at the running backs. Look at the space they have. Look at the gaps they have to get in and out and get chunks of yards at 10, 12 yards a pop. So, I think that interior line has been solidified, whether it's the addition of Ifedi, it's the combination of Ifedi and the coaching staff, or the coaching addition of Juan Castillo. I think definitely that interior of the offensive line is looking great for the Bears right now. If anything, I'm looking at tackles. I'm looking at left or right tackle. Like I said earlier, you can bring in a young tackle, whether he plays left tackle in college, you could bring him in and play him a right tackle. And then by the time you're ready to, jettison Leno or vice versa, you can flip them over to the other side. So that's what I would do is right now is I was bringing in tackles, because if you look at the backups right now for the Bears at tackle, you have Jason Springs, who's a bust second round pick for the Packers, a guy who can't stay healthy while he's not playing. So that makes me even more concerned. And then you have Rashard Coward, who was a converted defensive lineman who played, right guard last year. Now he's playing, backup right tackle. So there's some concerns there for me at the tackle spots, both in terms of the starters, long-term, and the depth right now.
There's a question up here from Steven, and I'm going to throw it to Danny, because Danny, you actually posted something about KJ Costello on Twitter over the weekend. The question is Costello for real, or was his number versus LSU too inflated to consider him a legit prospect? Danny, you want to field that?
Well, it's funny because Niel and I were having a chat about Costello last week as we were watching that game. And the one thing, he's a guy that really intrigued me. He's a guy that made my top 10 preseason list in terms of quarterbacks last year, because he was playing at Stanford. He was playing in that pro style offense. And he's a guy like, if you look for traits in terms of physical traits, he's got the size, he's got the arm strength. He's a smart kid. But, and then in terms of his numbers, they're going to be inflated this year playing for Mississippi State and playing for that Mike Leach, air raid offense. Don't look at the numbers, but look at the way he processes the game. Again, physical traits, I like him. I just we were talking, Niel and I were talking last week. He had a great first 2.5 quarters of that game, and then next thing you know, he started implode. I mean, he's losing the ball, he's fumbling, he's throwing interceptions left and right. So those things kind of concern me, but I'm definitely have my eye on that kid, because he's a guy that's going to put up numbers this year, playing in that offense. But and in terms of he's got the physical traits, but can he put it all together in terms of being able to process the game quickly and eliminate those mistakes, like he was running with the ball he was trying to run away from defenders with one hand, the ball in one hand. It doesn't cover it up with two hands. Like those are fundamental stuff. You got to cover up the ball with two hands, especially when you have these big defensive linemen swiping away at your hand trying to get the ball out. So things like that, clean that stuff up. I definitely think Costello has a chance to at the next level to develop.
I agree. I definitely think he has a chance. He had some injury issues last year. He had a good year 2 years ago. Had some injury issues last year. I think I heard the first half against Northwestern. Ended up, kind of putting it on the shelf towards the end of the year. But you're talking about a kid, like, again, Danny touched on. He's a really smart kid. He's played in a very run-heavy, type of offense. And so you really want to see what he can do when you really let him open it up. The thing that I really don't like about him is his mechanics. I think they're all over the place. I always feel like, he's shooting from the hip when he throws the ball. He keeps it low. You want to keep that ball high so you minimize your chances for turnovers in a muddy pocket. And I really don't honestly think that he's a very mobile guy. I mean, he can move the pocket, he can escape pressure, he can do all those things. But we see with a lot of things that Nagy likes to do, you need a guy that can be as much of a threat, and that's a word that scouts are using a hell of a lot more these days, especially with Pat Mahomes doing what he's doing. Guys got to be threats, whether it be with the legs, whether it be with the arm. He's not really a guy that you call a threat. Yeah, he could probably spray the ball all over the field. I don't see him as a guy that necessarily would fit perfectly into this office in Chicago. But he's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be a circus. So.
Yeah, Niel touched on two things that concern me about Castillo, and that's his elongated throwing motion. We're not talking about his feet in terms of the pocket, but he's got an elongated throwing motion, which what that does is it gives the corner, the defender, had some time to go ahead and jump those routes and get to and make a play on the football. So that kind of concerns me. He's got to work on speeding that up. And the other thing is he's a statue back there. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and be able to escape pressure and gain 10, 15 yards with his feet. So he's a statue back there. So if you better have a good offensive line, if you're bringing a kid like KJ Costello to be a quarterback.
Guys, this is a blast. Let's go another 10, 15 minutes and then we'll wrap up this first episode together. But I could go on for hours talking and really listening to you guys share your opinions on players and particularly looking at it from a Bears perspective. What I want to ask you guys is, since the return of college football, what other players have caught your eye and guys that you want to continue scouting this season? I'll start with you, Niel.
If we're going to go strictly on the topic of quarterbacks, I mean, I think that there's, Danny kind of touched on it earlier, there's probably a handful of guys, and then there's just a bunch of what if. I think that, going into this year, everyone had Trevor Lawrence as the no doubt number one draft pick, and I still feel that way. You look at, what he did, over the course of his career and some of the things that he even showed last week. I know it's only a Citadel, but you talk about a dude that knows how to fit the ball in elite a level of accuracy in a very tight windows. That first touchdown pass to Ladson in the first quarter was just a thing of beauty. And that's what he does really well. And on top of that, he has the ability to move the pocket. He has the ability to be a threat with his feet. He has really all the intangibles. He checks all the boxes. If you ask what is the weakness of this kid, you can't come up with anything. He's a little bit of a unicorn that way. And it goes for people when people that have actually seen the kid on the hoof, they say how much of a beast he is just standing there in shorts. He is listed on the site as 6'6", 220. If you want to use a player comp, think of Justin Herbert. Just a big, strong, athletic dude, nothing but muscle, cannon for an arm. He does, he gives you everything you want, but then you go and look at, how are we going to get this kid? What kind of draft cap are we going to, have to use to move into the number one spot? Are the Jets going to get rid of Darnold? A whole bunch of questions that are going to be asked. I don't know what's going on in the Jets game right now. I can't see the TV, but,
yeah, we had you move away from your TV room for audio reasons, but Darnold got hurt and he's returned to the game, so he's not hurt. At least I know that. Niel, let me ask you something about Trevor Lawrence. Last year, he had a spell early in the season where he had maybe 2 or 3 games where he just he didn't look like himself. He didn't look like he did in his freshman year. Were there any concerns there from that brief period of play, or was that just kind of an aberration?
I think it's 100% an aberration. If you watch this kid ever since he was starting games at the high school level, he was making college throws in high school. He was making NFL throws in college throughout the course of his entire career. He's an incredibly impressive young man. He's if you look at his PFF ratings last year, he ranked 5th in the entire country under pressure, first when blitzed. So that shows that he's very comfortable in the pocket. He's poised. He's mature. He's got, again, you can't really think of drawbacks. And I touched on his ability to fit balls in tight windows. He ranked third in that, and fifth in yards fitting balls in tight windows. And so there's a lot of things there that really, I mean, when you talk about confirmation and affirmation, I mean, you look at the numbers, you look at his play on the field, you see him live. I'm sure the ball zips out of his hands. He's got it all.
Steven's got a question here. He says it's a crazy one, but it's one worth taking a look at. He says, would you give up a 3rd round pick for Sam Darnold?
Third round pick for Darnold.
Yeah.
Although, I don't like trading picks.
That is for sure.
But if I could take that question first, I mean, there's going to be scenarios, guys, with the Jets, possibly the Giants. These guys could end up with the 1st, 2nd, 3rd pick in the draft, and now they're sitting there, looking at having drafted their quote unquote quarterback of the future year or 2 years ago, and there's a Trevor Lawrence sitting there, there's a Justin Fields sitting out there for them. Do they go ahead and make those, respectively, Daniel Jones or Sam Darnold available? And if you're the Bears, do you pounce on one of those 2 quarterbacks? That's another, those are 2 guys you have to think about right there. So Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold. There could be other players out there available. There could be a Baker Mayfield could be available. I'm not a big fan of him, but I'm just saying, like, those are some of the names that could be out there available. So don't just think necessarily of the draft. But if you're asking me, would I give up a 3rd round pick for Sam Darnold? I think 3rd round pick is too high for a guy that I'm not sure about. I wasn't sure about him coming out of college or USC. I didn't think he had the arm strength to succeed in the NFL. I think he's got some nice tools in terms of athletic ability. He's more of an intermediate kind of passer. He's not a guy that does it really well stretching it down the field. Now, he's made some amazing throws as a Jets quarterback, but I just don't know if he gets it. Again, we're talking about a guy processing the game, pre and post snap. Does he get that? And that's the key here. That's because that's what we have with Mitch right now. Mitch makes some great throws over his last 3 seasons, but his problem again is processing the game. And I think Darnold kind of relies on the same territory there. But that's going to be a question that's going to be posed to the Bears and other teams that are looking for quarterbacks this season. But just touch real quick on Niel, what you said about Trevor Lawrence, and I agree. I mean, he's got the prototypical size, looks, everything. NFL coaches, coordinators, GMs want in a quarterback. Trevor Lawrence has it. But for me, he still has some question marks. And again, these are just me picking here. But, in terms of his downfield accuracy, it's always hit or miss. It's a guy that in terms of processing the game, post snap, there's some decision making there that I think, could it be coached out of him? Possibly. But those are some question marks that I have. But again, I'm being nitpicky here. But the kid probably is going to be the 1st overall pick. However, I will not put it past Justin Fields. And I'm so happy that he's going to have a chance to play this season, because if this kid goes out and replicates what he did last year, I mean, he's going to be challenging Trevor Lawrence for that 1st overall pick. I'm telling you, what Fields adds to the game that Lawrence doesn't. Now, Lawrence is a good athlete, but Fields is a tremendous athlete. And I think he brings that extra added dimension of being able to be a dual threat, be a guy, in terms of changing his arm angle. He's a guy that can sidearm the ball, get the ball in tight windows, just like Lawrence can. But I think he's more athletic and a guy you can get out on the run on the outside of the pocket more. Not that Lawrence is any sort of slouch back there in terms of an athlete, but I think that Fields is just a better overall athlete. And I think his development last year, his first year as a starter at Ohio State, the growth he showed me in terms of being able to, post snap, be able to freeze safeties with his eyes and be able to make tight window throws. He showed me a feel for the passing game that I did not expect and that I did not see, to be honest with you, at Georgia. So he's definitely a kid that could challenge Trevor Lawrence for that 1st overall spot.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the kid has superstar potential. I think that he's a dude that it's like having Russell Wilson quarterback skill in a Lamar Jackson in the body type. That's pretty much what he's going to measure in at. He's listed 6'3", 228. Lamar Jackson was 6'0", 216. Russell Wilson, what he ran at the combine was like a 4.53. And 34 on the vert, 409 the shell, 697 the 7 cone. I can see Justin Fields doing a lot of those similar things. The thing I love about him, though, is that, everything that you said, 100%, I have those down on my notes. The thing that I love even more, though, is that he's not a run-first guy. He's going to use his athleticism. He's not going to abuse it. He's going to pick apart the defenses, and he's going to take what they give him in terms of open windows. Right. I think this kid has incredible upside. And even for a guy that wasn't a run-first guy, still ran for 484 yards last year and 10 touchdowns. You talk about efficiency. over 3,200 yards, 67% completion rate, 41 touchdowns with 3 picks. I mean, that's absurd.
And then Aldo, I'm sorry, I'm interrupt, but I got some questions here for Niel because I love the fact that we got him from the SEC. So he's seen all these players in the SEC, and there's 2 quarterbacks that I've got on my 2 watch list, and I want to run them by Niel here. So the first one is a guy that, and he's got me like up and down every time I watch him. That's Kellen Mond from Texas A&M. I mean, you look at the kid, physically 6'2", 215 pounds. He's athletic. He's a dual threat kid. He'll make a pinpoint throw down the field, and next thing he's making an airhead throw where he's throwing it into triple coverage, and the ball's picked off. So, Kellen Mond, do you see that first year, or it was the first or second year under Jimbo Fisher? He had a tremendous year. He threw for over almost 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, ran for an additional 8 touchdowns. So again, he's a kid that's a dual threat. Obviously, we're not talking about a first round or second round pick here. We're talking about a guy possibly in the third day of the draft. How do you see Kellen Mond? That's the one guy. And the other guy that no one's talking about, and I know he was backing up Tua. But Mack Jones from Alabama, man, 6'2", 210. Again, he's not the athlete. He's going to be a guy kind of like Costello, who's going to be a statue in the pocket. But you take a look, he throws a pretty deep ball. He's got some, really good downfield accuracy and ball placement on his throws. Not overly athletic. I understand that part. But, you've seen these guys up close and personal, while you're at Mississippi State. What are your thoughts on Mack Jones from Alabama and Kellen Mond from Texas A&M?
Kellen Mond, I think, is one of those guys from the SEC that has been the model of consistent inconsistency. He has, like you said, he has all the physical traits in the world. He does a lot of really nice things with the football. He can move. He can threaten you with his feet. I just don't see him as a guy that. Ultimately, he's a wait and see guy, and I think everyone in the NFL is in the same boat on that. I think they want to see really solid 4 or 5 games before they really start to get an idea, and we'll probably know by November what we think of him. Mack Jones, like 100%. I think that kid's really intriguing right now. The first impression that I got of Mack Jones is when he came in after Tua got hurt in our game last year, and he had a little bit of deer in the headlights thing going on, and that was kind of concerning if you're looking at him as an NFL prospect. I think what teams have to do though, he had the deer in the headlights thing last year against Tennessee. He's going through the growing pains. He did so much so last year. I think he did a really good job of improving in the offseason. I think you look at the Auburn game last year, though. He goes into a hostile environment, big time rivalry type of situation. He achieved lots of growth in that game alone, even before he even get to the offseason. He was able to shake off mistakes. He had a really bad pick in that game, came back, made a lot of big throws to get the game back even. He showed the ability to gain confidence. He's getting better and better. He has an incredible FBI, and he does have the ability to move the pocket. Yeah, he's not overly mobile. He's not going to be a dynamic playmaker from a quarterback run perspective. But he is a guy that can move the pocket. And I think what you saw in Missouri is a kid that has showed a lot of growth and development over the course of the past few months. Even so, not having spring ball, which is pretty incredible. Which means he put in a lot of work on his own in the offseason, and that's pretty impressive for a kid that's now starting maybe his first handful of games. He's definitely a kid I'm going to watch hardcore going forward.
And that's the thing about him is he's not a scrambler. He's not a guy that's going to be able to run away from pressure and create yards with his legs. But if you notice him in the pocket, his pocket awareness for a guy who hasn't played that much is pretty good there, because he shuffles his feet, slides to the left, slides to the right, finds a passing window and gets the ball down the field. And like I said, he doesn't have the biggest arm in the college football or anything like that, but he's a guy who can make NFL type throws. He throws a pretty deep ball. So I think like I always, he was in a competition for that job, and I don't know why he was in a competition for that job. It's just because Nick Saban has to promise these high price recruits to come in and they're going to compete. I don't know why, because to me, he was definitely a guy that deserved to start after Tua left. So that's a guy, Mack Jones, I'm going to keep an eye on at Alabama this year.
100%. 100%.
Hey guys, let me get rid of that graphic. Okay. Question regarding Jamie Newman, who was a quarterback I saw play at Wake Forest last year, transferred over to Georgia, and has now decided to opt out, and has announced that he's probably going to go into the NFL draft 2021. Want to get each of your opinion on, does it hurt his draft capital that he chose to draft, to opt out? So are you taking him off the board? Are you coming to me and saying, no, don't want him on our board, he opted out? Or do you want to find out more about why he opted out, or do you not care and you feel, well, he opted out, that's his prerogative. I still like us to take a good look at his tape and bring him in here on our or take a look at him during our pro day. Niel, you go first.
Yeah, sure. I think automatically on the surface it's a massive red flag. And here's why I say that. When I was a liaison in Mississippi State and I met with these kids individually. Hello?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, when I was a liaison in Mississippi State, meeting with these kids individually, giving them advice and perspective, I always told them this, like, one thing in particular that I hope always stuck is, like, eliminate questions. Eliminate questions. If you don't show up for pro day, if you don't show up for Rising Senior Day, if you sit out a bowl game, if you're anywhere outside of where you're supposed to be doing what you're supposed to do, all it does is create more questions, eliminate the questions. And so the big question is right now is, why is he sitting out? The entire league wants to know, why the hell is he sitting out? Is it because he legitimately does have a fear of COVID? In that case, what kind of medical questions does that bring up? Is it a family thing? Is it just a own personal fear? Does it have anything to do with the situation with him and JT Barrett, right?
JT Daniels, right? With him and JT Daniels, did he feel like he was losing? He was losing control of the ability to start for Georgia, and decided to use COVID as a mask, so to speak, to get out of it. Where's his IQ level at? Was he able to pick up the nuances of the offense? Was he able to learn at a fast pace? Was he able to process the way they want him to process? And I think the other thing too that's really concerning is that such a knee-jerk decision like this, who's in his ear feeding him information or advising him? Is it a family member that wants to get way too involved? Is it an agent that wants his piece of the cut early? So those are all things that really concern me. And to me, if I was his agent, if I was his dad, if I was his liaison, whatever, I would tell him, come back for one more year, because the reason why you went to Georgia in the first place was to raise your draft stock. You have a lot of natural physical attributes, some athletic attributes, the way you throw the ball. You did some really nice things at Wake Forest last year. But if you look at your last 5 games, kid, you went 1-4, 3 of which of those games were abysmal quarterback ratings. You rocked a 14 against Clemson and Syracuse, in games in which you really had no shot in hell of winning. Those are big time concerns. I would tell him, you really need to come back for one more year and run the offense for Georgia. Increase your draft stock, prove that you're worth it. I think right now, as it stands, there's probably half the league, probably at least 15 teams that would probably say no automatically, just on account that he just went ahead, knee-jerk reaction, decided to sit the year out.
Danny, you feel the same way?
Yeah, I remember earlier I told you there's 4 quarterbacks I feel good about, and there's a 5th guy that I'm kind of wishy-washy now. The 5th guy is Newman, and reason why is I was so looking forward to watching him play in the SEC this year at Georgia, just that step up in competition. I wanted to see him go ahead and play with some big time competition, play with some good receivers. I want to see him develop his game, get better. He's a kid that I like his skill set. When I first put on his tape last year, the first guy I thought of in terms of a comp is Cam Newton. He's a guy that's we were seeing some of his highlights here. He's just a big kid. He's an easy mover in terms of getting out in space and being able to run away from defenders, as a ball carrier. So another kid that we're going to give him that dual threat label. But he throws a nice deep ball. He's got solid arm strength. I've talked about his size. I just wanted to see him take his game to the next level. I think he has the ability to be a potential starting NFL quarterback. So, and then of course, once he goes ahead and foregoes the season and opts out, the rumors started, coming around that he was going to probably lose the battle to JT Daniels for the starting quarterback position, which I find to probably be bogus, because seeing that JT Daniels was just now cleared to play, I don't see how Newman would have lost the job to Daniels in terms of starting at Georgia. So we don't know what his personal situation was, whether he has some sort of family with the underlying conditions, and his concern was with them, and that's totally his right. But I'm real disappointed not seeing him play this year in the SEC with Georgia, and I think this kid has a chance. I'm not saying he's going to be all pro superstar or anything like that, but he's got a chance to be a quality NFL starting quarterback.
100%. Fringe guy for me too. Same exact thing.
All right.
Yes.
Any other players that you guys want to talk about before we end this first episode of Draft on Tap?
I got tons of players. What position you want to talk
about? I know you do. I know we could go another 3 hours easily. But pick a 1 or 2 players that you'd like to highlight on this episode, and then we'll tease our next episode.
You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm really intrigued by Trey Lance, the kid from North Dakota State. You start to wonder, early in springtime, if this kid was just a product of hype. But no, the more you get into it, the more you realize this kid could potentially be the real deal. And he's got a steam engine of momentum gaining right now, leading into his game on Saturday, which is at 2:30 on ESPN Plus, by the way. But I'm going to be locked in to that game and checking him out, because that's going to be the only time we're going to be able to see him before he declares. I don't think there's a shot in hell he comes back for one more year. But the thing about this game is that about this kid is that leading into the season, he's a dude that 5 or 6 GMs have already called on him. If you know anything about the GMs calling players, it's because they're super, super serious about taking these guys early. He's a guy that right now I think is projected by most mock drafts as being a mid-first round guy. But I think he has the talent, the skill set, and really all the extra stuff upstairs that we always talk about of getting himself up into a top 10 pick. The thing is about this kid is that he grew up in a football family. His pops played ball. His pops was a pro. He grew up around his entire life. The kid is a legitimate ball junkie. He's the first one in the office. He's bringing others with him. He's studying the film. He's learning everything he needs to do, and coaching up his teammates at the same time. And he is that dual threat kid that we love. He's a high IQ kid. He makes all the calls at the line. He sets all the protections. He runs the pass check. And that's mainly because North Dakota State runs one of those old school, antiquated type, deals where everybody gets in the huddle and he calls a play and he comes up to the line and he makes every single call that gets the offense going. His stats last year, absurd: 2,786 yards, 67% completion, 28 touchdowns, 0 picks. And ran for another 1,100 yards. Oh, by the way, another 1,100 yards with 14 scores. The kid's just absurd. He's got size, the arm strength. Some might call it a cannon. His attitude is, my job is to play football. He's not worried about the draft. He's not worried about extracurricular stuff. He's not worried about peripheral, things that don't matter. His job is 100% focused on this game Saturday, because I think he realizes that this game Saturday, it could make him millions of dollars in the end. I think this kid is incredible, even considering that he was recruited at the FBS level as an athlete. Nobody even wanted this kid to play quarterback at the FBS level. He got the opportunity to go to North Dakota State, and mainly because of the quarterback tradition that they are building there. And some might say, oh, well, he's another one of those guys that's just like a 1-year wonder on X number of starts. True. However, he's been sitting behind 2 NFL guys. He's seen 2 guys that were taken, one in the first round, one in the 5th round, do it. And I think that's really intriguing for a kid that has been patient, has waited his turn. And for as much of a high character kid as this kid's reported to be, I really don't think you can really go wrong. It's just a matter of getting it right. I'm sure there's going to be tons of scouts that are Saturday. The entire league is going to be at this game. It'll be interesting to see what he does. I'm really excited about it.
It is amazing seeing him run with the ball, the power that he has. One of the clips just about a minute ago was him at probably the 2-yard line, and he just powered a couple of tacklers into the end zone. And look at him here, amazing speed. He's quite the athlete. Probably the type of guy that Nagy would start licking his chops over just because he's so athletic.
100%.
I know, Danny, you've looked at his tape, and what your thoughts on Trey?
Again, the athleticism just pops on tape. This kid is a phenomenal athlete. Look at that throw; those are NFL type throws where he's got a rocket for an arm, nice arc on his ball. He does a good job of getting away from the pressure, escaping the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield, and finding that open guy. So I'm definitely a fan of Trey Lance. He's played in, and what makes me even more happy or excited about him is he plays in a pro style system that runs pro style sets. You see him doing roll action, play action, getting out of the pocket and looking. He's encouraged to go ahead and look to throw the ball downfield. So those are things that definitely excite me about Trey Lance. But he's a guy that, for me, is going to be this year's Jordan Love. He's got to go to a team that's going to have a quarterback that he can sit back behind and watch and learn from, and maybe a year or two or whatnot. So if you're talking about the Bears possibly taking this guy in the mid to late, first round, because that's where I assume the Bears are going to be in terms of the draft in the first round. And you're bringing in a Nick Foles back to be your bridge quarterback. I think Trey Lance would be a perfect guy to run that Matt Nagy scheme. So yeah, Trey Lance is definitely, he's one of my top 4 in terms of, well, I should just go, I keep talking about it. I should just go and tell them. My top 4 are in no particular order are Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, my guy Sam Ehlinger, and then Trey Lance. So those are my top 4 quarterbacks. But we're talking about guys that I'm keeping an eye on. So just a couple of quarterbacks here that I want to let our listeners know and you guys know about as well. We talked about Mack Jones already.
Before you do that, Danny, let's answer Ace Daniel's question about Trey. Can he make all of the throws that an NFL quarterback needs to make?
Yes, he can make all the throws.
There you go. All right, Go ahead.
Yeah. So we talked about Mack Jones. We talked about Kellen Mond, guys I'm keeping an eye on. But there's some guys that probably, and these are guys I'm looking more so towards mid to late day 3 guys. And there's a kid that plays for Kansas State, doesn't put up much numbers in terms of stats and the big gaudy numbers, but all he does is he wins, man. This guy, Skyler Thompson, a senior from Kansas State, is a guy that intrigues me. I'm looking at him, the team captain. He's a guy that enters a senior campaign ranked 4th nationally in terms of quarterbacks with rushing touchdowns. So another guy that's got that dual threat option. He's one of those guys that just knocks you the leadership ability to will his team to victory. He helped spearhead a big comeback this past weekend where Kansas State came back and upset Oklahoma. So Skyler Thompson's a name to keep an eye on this year, guys. And this kid from Cincinnati, Desmond Ritter, 6'3", 210 pounds. When I first put on his tape, watched his throwing motion, watched the way he moved around the pocket, watched the way he ran with the ball, I got like Colin Kaepernick kind of thoughts there. He's got that type of body type, 6'3", like I said, 6'3", 210, skinny quarterback, a guy that's also capable of using his legs to move down the field. So he's a guy to keep an eye on as well. This Desmond Ritter from Cincinnati. So those are my quarterbacks. In terms of my defensive side, we're looking at linebackers here. So the one guy that really has popped so far for me is this kid from Notre Dame, and I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize. It's Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa. I think that's how you pronounce it. But this kid is all over the field. He's a little undersized for me in terms of outside linebacker, so he's probably going to be projected inside more so, especially in the Bears scheme. He's about 6'1", I think 6'1", 210, 215 pounds. But he's a guy that's all over the field. You're talking about a guy who can rush off the edge and from a 2-point stance, a guy who can drop back in coverage, a guy who can come back and thud in terms of his as a run support. He can fill the gap for his run fits. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And the other guy is Jabril Cox, a guy that was with North Dakota State last year, transferred to LSU, and we're talking about a sideline playmaker, guys. This guy's going to be a tackling machine. Keep an eye out on Jabril Cox, linebacker from LSU. Those are my guys to keep an eye on.
Neil, what do you got?
Good stuff. Skyler Thompson. I tweeted about him on Saturday. I was really impressed by that kid. Always was, though. He was the same type of kid in high school as he is now. He's just a winner. He used the word moxie as the same word that I wrote down. Also high character kid and just, elite toughness. You just love the way this kid just goes out and he doesn't put up ridiculous numbers, but he just wins the football game. And, the way that he brought those guys back, at Oklahoma on Saturday was absurdly impressive. You look at the one game I was really paying attention to on Saturday afternoon, the one I had on the main screen, one of my 7 screens I had up was Kyle Trask in Florida. I mean, the kind of game that kid put up was very impressive. And you talk about a kid, like the really interesting story about Kyle Trask is that, he was a guy that I talked to a few guys the past couple of weeks about him. He wasn't really talked about in the springtime. For whatever reason, he was a guy that was really kind of flying under the radar to a certain extent. If you remember, he relieved Felipe Franks against Kentucky in the fourth quarter last year. Never looked back. Led them to an 11-2 record. Started the last 10 games. And he really took control of the offense. You look what he did against Ole Miss on Saturday. 71% completion rate, 416 yards, 6 touchdowns, no picks. Earning himself with a 93.7 quarterback rating. He's a guy that, he's really elevated his stock over the year. That new staff that came in down there, they're I don't want to say notorious, but they're certainly known for developing quarterbacks, both from a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a mechanical standpoint. And he really absorbed all the nuances of the position from that staff, from Dan Mullen and Brian Johnson down there. He really showed the mental fortitude of waiting his turn. He suffered through some injuries. He probably would have won the job over Felipe Franks if it wasn't for, Jabbar Zuniga hitting him in fall camp and knocking him out for the year. The mental fortitude is there. He's able to overcome adversity. And you talk about guys that are high character, high work ethic, impeccable leadership, doing all the right things, spreading all the love around to his teammates. The only thing I really question about him is the one he's scouting in terms of arm violence. I'm not really sure how strong that kid's arm is, but he did 100% make pretty much all the throws on Saturday. He's got traditional motion. The release point is perfect. He can be multiple different arm angles, a little bit elongated, but timing is on point, ball placement. Every once in a while he can tend to struggle with accuracy, but I think he puts a decent amount of velocity on the ball considering what he has, from a mechanical tools to work with. And he throws catchable balls. The 12 of those incompletions on Saturday, the good portion of them were ball drops. I don't have the actual number in front of me. I apologize, but I'm really impressed by this kid. And he's a mountain of a man too. He's listed at 6'5", 240. Probably means he's probably 6'4", 235, but that's besides the point.
Right.
But having said that, he's a big, strong dude. You need big, strong quarterbacks in Chicago. Thinking about playing from mid-October to the end of December in the elements, the wind, the snow, the rain. You need a guy that has a strong arm that can push the ball down the field. I think he's worth keeping an eye on going forward and seeing what he does the rest of this SEC schedule.
It's curious, or it's a good thing you brought him up, because that's a guy that I'm kind of hit or miss on, because watching his tape from last year, because I was thinking putting him in my top 10 preseason list, but man, watching his tape from last year, he's all over the place. He's not a great athlete, displayed average athletic traits. He's not someone that's going to be able to extend plays or threaten defenses with his legs. He's not mobile enough, right? So I'm looking at his accuracy, like I talked about, it's hit or miss. Anything beyond 25 yards, he's all over the place. Anything 25 or less, especially in between the numbers, he's on point, in terms of crossers, slant routes, hitch routes, digs, whatever. He's hitting those things on target, but he go 25 yards and over. He's all over the place, and he's throwing guys over. Because I was watching Van Jefferson last year as well, scouting him, and I'm like, whoa, this quarterback is horrible. However, you do dig some into his background. The kid had not started since the 9th grade until last year, so he's a guy that's still developing, and then comes out. You talked about his positives. You nailed it. He's got the size. He's about 6'4", 6'3", 230 some pounds. He's a guy that can take a hit. He can lowers pad level, run into defenders if he's running out of bounds or whatnot. Display, like I said, talked about that accuracy on those intermediate routes. Within the numbers, on those slants, crossers, so on and so forth. I like his accuracy there. And he has that touch on that ball to be able to feather it between the second and third levels, like Niel just touched on. So he does have some positives. But just overall, his tape, when I was watching it coming into this season, it just really turned me off. But now you put on his game from last week, he looked like a totally different quarterback, to be honest with you. He was hitting balls 100%. Downfield. So then now you go back to his background. It's like, all right, this guy hadn't started since 9th grade. He was thrown into the starting quarterback position last year after Felipe Franks, the starter, got injured. So, so now I can understand why he looks so bad on tape from last year. However, he comes out this week. He throws for 416 yards, 6 touchdowns, which matches Joe Burrow's season SEC opener record for touchdowns in an opener last year. So could this be this year's Joe Burrow, a guy that some thought maybe be 4th, 3rd round, maybe 5th round to go up to the high 1st round? We'll see. But if he continues to play the way he was playing on Saturday, I think this guy definitely has, like I said, some of the physical skills, traits that NFL scouts and coordinators, coaches look for. So keep an eye on Kyle Trask. That's a good name to bring up there as well. So now again, he was playing against Ole Miss, and apparently Ole Miss doesn't like playing defense. So we'll see how that goes on. But yeah, Kyle Trask is a guy. Physical traits are there if he just cleans up the rest of his game. And Dan Mullen is known to make some quarterbacks there. So we'll see what happens there in Florida.
Right. He's got the Fighting Muschamps this weekend. Those guys actually play a little bit of defense. So we'll see what he does.
Yep. Outstanding stuff, gentlemen. Outstanding. So here's what I'd like to do. We're going to return here 2 weeks from tonight. And what I'd like to do is look at one side of the football, the quarterback position, and another side of the football, the edge rusher position. And what I'd love for us to do, the assignment that I am giving you guys, is let's look at 10 quarterbacks and 10 edge rushers, and let's assign them a draft round position. So identify the guys at quarterback who you think are first rounders, second rounders, third rounders, etc. And the same thing with the edge rusher positions, so that we can start to develop our board and have them assigned a draft round. Does that sound like something we can do?
100%.
Sure. Yeah. I think that would be a great way. And then as the season goes on, we'll be coming at you. All of our viewers will be coming at you every 2 weeks during the college football season. We'll start to develop this draft board and assigning people by positions, and we'll make adjustments as the season goes on, so that if Niel says to us, hey, I had this quarterback at round 1, I think now it's starting to look like he's a second rounder. And Danny says to me, I had this edge rusher in round 3. He's definitely playing like a low first rounder. We'll make those adjustments and alert everyone who watches this show know what's going on as the season progresses. But again, we're looking at all these prospects from the standpoint of the Chicago Bears. What are the needs for the team, and who are the players that can address those needs for us? Guys, final thoughts. Let's go around the table here. Danny, let us know what your thoughts are as we complete episode 1 of Draft on Tap.
Just excited, man. I'm so pumped to be able to work with you and Niel, and like I said, bring in this whole experience in terms of like 2 scouts going at it with a GM and trying to give them their information. So I just hope our listeners are enjoying this and taking the information and just using it for when it comes around draft time, because college football is here. The draft is going to be around the corner. Next thing you know, you'll look around and it's April 2021, and Roger Goodell is up to the podium, announcing the first pick in the draft. So we're just going to keep informing you guys, giving you guys all these players, and like Aldo said, we're going to be giving you these players and how they fit into the Bears system and the Bears scheme. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. I'm excited. I can't wait to continue on.
Niel, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm amped up. I mean, like I said at the very beginning, I'm so excited, so pumped to be a part of this project. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and let's roll with it.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have you, Niel. I think if I were to give you a grade for your first show, I definitely an A. What do you think, Danny?
You want to give him a big head now. You want to kind of work him at a C and let him work up to the A. Come on now, you want to give him A for show.
I was going to say A-.
Like I said, when we talked to Niel, I knew he was going to be a great fit. His knowledge, his background in college football, his interaction with some of the the scouts in the NFL, and come around draft time, we're going to be hearing a lot of stuff that's going to be going on, and we got a guy on the show that have some connections there that could be able to give you guys some stuff that scouts are thinking about. Scouts are talking about in terms of prospects and how they're looking and how they're not looking.
Hey, before I let you guys go, and again, we'll be back here on October 15th. Want to get your quick thoughts on this upcoming game, Bears and the Colts. Go around the table and tell me, what's your confidence level that the Bears are going to walk away with a victory? Niel, why don't you go first?
Really excited to see Nagy's playbook really open up for the first time. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think relatively we're still pretty healthy across the board. So I'm as far as a confidence level, I'd probably say 90%.
Excellent. What about you, Danny?
I had a couple thoughts on this game. But first of all, the game opened up in Vegas as the Bears as the underdogs. Now they're playing home, and usually typically the home team gets the 3 points. But I was curious how they thought the Colts were the favorites here. At least Vegas did. So that kind of shocked me because the Colts. I mean, I know they're a good team. They're predicted preseason to be one of the stronger teams out in the West, in the AFC. But I mean, they're not something that scares me right now. So I'm just curious is in terms of the Bears defense, will they, with that offensive line that the Colts have, will the defense, finally be able to stop the run? Because if they have a rookie in Jonathan Taylor, that's a pretty good rookie. And I think he's a guy that if you don't control him, and they have an offensive line that could manhandle, move guys off the point of attack. So we'll see how the Bears defense, responds to being challenged last week by the Falcons in terms of the run defense. So I want to see how they come back. And then Niel touched on it. I want to see what Nagy does in terms of his playbook, with the quarterback that he knows runs the system. The only thing is you got to keep Nick Foles upright and keep him healthy. So as long as he's healthy, I expect the Bears to start putting up some points on the board, and also keep an eye on some of these receivers. A lot of times, Trubisky would always just eye Allen Robinson. He would go to Allen Robinson. He'd miss wide open guys. A lot of times, Anthony Miller got thrown under the bus for running the wrong route or whatnot. But I want to see these receivers. I want to see the way Nick Foles spreads the ball around. You're going to see more of Anthony Miller getting involved. You're going to see more of Javon Wims getting involved. You're going to see more of Ted Ginn got a ball thrown to him last week as soon as Nick Foles came into the game. I don't know why Ted Ginn was on his roster when Trubisky was playing. He was supposed to be that deep threat, the guy who can stretch the field. He was never used. So I want to see what Ginn can provide. So again, I want to see the ball, them spreading the ball around. I also want to see who gets Tariq Cohen's touches. Is it going to be Cordell Patterson? Artavius Pierce, the kid they promoted from the practice squad, is he going to be able to come in there and take some of those carries off of David Montgomery's load there too? So I noticed that Montgomery got more heavily involved in the passing game after Cohen left the game last week. So let's see if that continues this week as well. So a very interesting game, very intrigued. But again, we talked about it at the beginning of the show. Everything starts up front. If the Bears defensive line does not stop that Colts offensive line from moving them off their spots, I think the Colts are just going to run the ball down their throats. So defense has got to respond this week.
And Taylor's really averaging under 4 yards per carry. He's at 3.8. And so while, the Colts have a really strong offensive line, I think the bigger question is, like Danny is pointing out here, is because the Bears defense is ranked, I think, at 24th in yards allowed, their rushing defense yards allowed. Is this a bad matchup for them? So we'll definitely see. The other thing that I'm interested in seeing is Matt Nagy going to go away from these plays under center and rely more on the shotgun, which is what Nick Foles has been more comfortable with? And if so, is that going to harm the Bears' rushing attack, which has been very, very effective under center, with Trubisky handing the ball off to David Montgomery and him averaging about 5 yards per carry on plays under center? So are we in danger now of tarnishing the rushing attack for the Bears if we go to a primarily shotgun approach? You guys have any thoughts on that? Do you have
I hope not, because I'm telling you, we're seeing David Montgomery, what he's capable of doing these last. Now, again, he hasn't had any big monster games, but he hasn't been given the opportunities. I'm sure if you give this kid 20 to 25 carries a game, with the way that offensive line is creating those holes for him, those lanes, I think this guy's going to be able to get you 90 to 95, 100 yards a game. So just continue to pound the ball. Now, I must admit, I have not been as disappointed with Matt Nagy's play calling this year as I have been in the past. Now, he still has those 3rd and 1 toss plays and those crazy passes on 3rd and 1 and 4th. That drives me crazy. But I guess overall, I think I like the way he's balanced the run versus the pass. So I hope that continues. I hope he doesn't just go, crazy because now he's got his quarterback that he can open up his playbook to and just continue to throw the ball. I hope he just continues that balance between run and pass.
Yeah. To Niel, to Danny's point earlier in the show, the play of these offensive guards, James Daniels and Jermaine Ifedi, has been great, along with Cody Whitehair. So you hate to kind of lose that the impact that they've had on the run game and nullify it by going to a offensive scheme where you're throwing it 40 to 50 times a game and eliminating the rushing attack.
No, absolutely 100%. I think that if you look at some of these, both of these fourth quarter comebacks these past 2 weeks, one of them was pretty much because David Montgomery led the way down the field, ripping off mad chunks of yards and getting them in position to win the game. I don't think you can ever get yourself in a position to take the ball out of the hands of somebody that has the ability to be special. And so I think Nagy's smarter than that. You just hope that, he doesn't get too intrigued by tossing the ball over the field.
Right. Well, I'm really super excited about the list of quarterbacks you guys are going to present because, hell, when we get back here in 2 weeks, the Bears could be 5-0, and Nick Foles could be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. And so we could be then thinking about drafting a developmental quarterback in the mid rounds as opposed to maybe looking at a first round investment at quarterback. So I'm dying to know who you guys are going to slot into that 3rd, 4th, 5th round as potential quarterback prospects. And then I'm also dying to know who are the edge rushers that you really are looking for, because you can't have enough edge rushers. We know you got to pressure that quarterback. And so I'm anxious to know what names you're going to present to our viewers and to me, your general manager, moving forward. All right. So guys, again, great job. And thank you all for watching this show. Let your friends know about Draft on Tap and the approach that we're talking this season. Let everyone know that we are here to tell the story about the Chicago Bears 2021 draft, because we're going to be making it with our own draft projection. We'll see you soon.